to this episode of the Rise to Reign podcast. I'm your host, Amy Killingsworth, and this episode is about femininity. So it's a follow-on episode to the one I did prior to this, which is about polarity. So if you haven't heard that one, there is a little bit of background information about the topic and some foundational information that I shared that you might want to go back and listen to, maybe even before you listen to this one. So femininity is one side of the polarity pole. So it's an integral part of our original design. So God is the perfect expression of masculinity, but he's also the perfect expression of femininity, which sounds weird because we say he, because he's represented throughout scripture mostly as a father. But he's also represented in ways in Hebrew language that is feminine, that and as a mother, and with feminine qualities as well. So God isn't a male just because we identify him as father. He is the perfect expression of femininity and masculinity, equal and the same. So when we look for our original design, since we are image bearers, we always look to God, to the source, to the creator, to the Most High, to see what it is that we are supposed to look like, what we're supposed to look like before the world gave us a script to read off of, before the world put layers upon layers on us, before the world traumatized us so that we developed unhealthy patterns and styles of relating. So this is kind of a topic where angels fear to tread. And I'm going there because it is so critical to your design. It's so critical to our healing. It's so critical to us living fully expressed, fully alive life, so that we understand who we are and that we take those layers off and those wounded and we heal those wounds and we allow for our true nature to shine forth, because that's really where we find our fulfillment. And as we say all along, the Rise to Reign process and framework is about healing, because God wants you healed so that you can wholeheartedly live your purpose and love your life. So if we're having a conversation about purpose and we don't have a conversation about polarity or where you are in the masculine, feminine pole, where you are versus where your authentic self is, then we're not having a full and robust conversation. When we have a conversation about loving your life, we're not having it fully and robustly if we don't talk about this issue. It's very critical to your quality of life, to your well-being, to your success. And I don't just mean monetarily or career success, but your success as a human, as a person in the world, is that you are expressing exactly who you truly were made to be before you were wounded in this area. And interestingly, the adversary comes and attacks gender more than anything else, because gender is at the heart of our representation as image bearers. So gender is how we express the character and the nature of God. All throughout scripture, when it talks about characteristics of God, it is gender either or. It is either or. It's both and, but it's either or. It's never one at the same time. He's either a mother or a father. He's either behaving masculine or he's behaving and expressing feminine. And so nary the twain shall meet. Now they're blended perfectly in the Father, but they're not blended perfectly in us. We are further on the spectrum on one side or the other. So again, I want you to imagine polarity, gender polarity, as a spectrum. And so way over here on the far right side is feminine, and way over here is masculine. And there's a dividing line between the two. There's a dividing line. So if you are a feminine person, you will be able to tell because your body will tell you. You are on the feminine side if you have a feminine body, which we all know what that means. When a baby comes out and it's a girl, we can tell because of the anatomy. Vice versa, when a baby comes out and it's a boy, we can tell because of the anatomy. We can even look inside the womb with sonogram and see what a person is gender-wise by physical characteristics. Now, there are some very, very rare anomalies I'm aware of, but in general, we know if you're on the feminine side of the spectrum of polarity or the masculine side by your physical attributes. Okay, that's easy. It's become cloudy. It doesn't have to be, but it's easy to, when you use logic, it's easy to see where you lie on the spectrum. Not on the spectrum, but which side of the spectrum. Now, within that, on the feminine side, there are a multitude of variations. And on the feminine side, there are the masculine side, there are multiple variations. So if you're just slightly over the line on the feminine side, you're going to have a lot of masculine energy. You're going to have a lot of you're going to express a lot of masculine characteristics as a feminine person. If you're slightly on the masculine side as a male, you're going to express more feminine. But I would like to submit to you that if you are a feminine person or a masculine person in a feminine or masculine body, the further you move towards the far side of the spectrum, the happier and the more relaxed and the more at home you're going to feel. And people, as you heal, because you have to heal the trauma alongside of this, because people will argue me to the ground on this. And don't worry, I'm used to it. If you're having arguments or offense in your heart right now, that's okay. I'm okay with that. And I hope that you'll stick with this and just open your mind to maybe consider this. Because what happens is when we get traumatized, usually through either sexual abuse or being rejected because of our gender or gender qualities of our specific gender being denigrated, is we tend to create a personality. We tend to create a style of relating to get us accepted and to be able to move through life as it is, not as it should be, but as it is. And so we tend to say, well, being a feminine person, the feminine qualities isn't working, or it's getting me rejected, or I'm not able to be promoted, or I'm not able to get respect, or I'm being abused because of it. And so we look over on the other side of the spectrum and we're like, oh, well, he's getting promoted and he's getting what I want. So I'm going to take that attribute and I'm going to mimic it and I'm going to mirror it. And it's not really me. It's like a coat or a piece of clothing that I put on, or more accurately, a piece of armor that I put on. So since we're talking about femininity, and I'm going to do an entire episode on masculinity, so don't worry, guys, you get your moment too. But this is about femininity. This particular episode is about femininity. That wasn't. Everything I just said was about polarity. So now we're going to get into femininity, and I'm going to talk about it specifically in how it relates to women. So that's what happens is in our world, feminine qualities, feminine skills, feminine energy is considered weak. It's considered less than the more masculine qualities. And so as women, we are also, generally speaking, physically weaker, and we're prone to being perpetrated against. We're prone to being attacked. We're prone to being abused because we're more vulnerable because of our size and our strength compared to our masculine counterpart. So what happens a lot of the time, most of the time, I would say, growing up in our world, is that because of how much it hurts to be a woman, and that's not right, but it's true, because of how much it hurts to be a woman, because we're not valued for our true nature, we put on a masculine mask and we put on a masculine set of armor, and we reach for masculine qualities so that we can have a sense of being protected. And there's a lot of things at work here because we are supposed to be protected, but we're supposed to be protected by men. Men's role are protectors and providers. And so there's a definite interplay here, is that when our primary masculine man in our life doesn't show up in a godly, healed way as protector and provider, that is the impetus for massive, massive trauma and woundedness around our femininity. And so because we have this need, because we have this desire, because we are supposed to be protected and provided for, we go to this toxic self-sufficiency, usually through a process. We get to where we're like, I'm going to do that for myself. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm not going to be vulnerable. I'm not going to be soft, because being vulnerable and being soft only gets me abuse, or only gets me neglected, or only gets me abandoned, or only gets me left out. So we go to this place where we harden up and we put a shell on and we put a mask on and we begin to protect and provide for ourselves. So if you haven't noticed already, that's like the main characteristic of masculinity, is protecting and providing. All males have a inborn, innate makeup that they are hardwired to do that. Now, again, men can be dysfunctional as well because of woundedness and trauma and not be showing up that way. But that's a healed perspective. Protection and provision is a masculine energy. It's a masculine effort. So when we are wounded as females, it's usually because our primary masculine role model didn't show up adequately in protection and in provision for us. And so we're not able to blossom and grow our femininity in that environment. So understand this. Women learn femininity in the presence of masculinity. We learn femininity in the presence of masculinity. And yes, it's taught and passed down through mothers, either poorly or correctly, or usually some combination in between. But we can't fully blossom into femininity without the presence of masculinity, because we learn who and how we are usually by observing and interacting with its opposite. And that's a way that we explain things a lot of the time, isn't it? It's like, well, what does it mean to go fast? Well, fast is not slow. Fast is other than slow. And so femininity is other than masculinity. And in addition to watching and learning from the female role models that we have, we learn and develop and grow our femininity in the presence of masculinity. Healthy, whole masculinity is where femininity opens and blossoms, because it feels safe. Because if the masculine is protecting and creating the container, the feminine can blossom and open and be soft. And these are feminine qualities. It's qualities of playfulness. It's qualities of openness. It's qualities of softness. And so what happens, this is true for both genders, but what happens is as we grow these hard shells around our heart, and as we put on this masculine armor and this masculine mask, we realize, oh, that's not attractive to men. So it isn't. And so as we, maybe enter into puberty and we start to notice boys and we start to want to be desired by them, we then try to create a femininity, but we do it on the external of the masculine armor that we have on. So this looks like makeup, it looks like hair, it looks like wearing seductive clothing and trying to attract the attention of a man visually, because males are typically very, very visual. So we try to attract that attention, and it works to get their attention, but it doesn't work to keep the attention or to build a lasting, really fiery, passionate love relationship. Because in order for the masculine to be drawn in, the true divine feminine, our true characteristic and nature needs to be expressed, and you can't fake it. you can't mimic it. You can't mirror it. It's either there. It is there, but it needs to come out from under the layers of armor that we put on. So I've already alluded to it, but I want to be really clear about what feminine qualities are. So femininity is the desire to fill up. So you can see this anatomically, and I won't get too graphic, but femininity is emptiness, an empty space that wants to be filled. And you can see this with women who, how we want you to talk to us, and we want your attention. And a lot of us in a shadow sense overeat or overconsume or shop too much or are workaholics because we're trying to fill an empty space with something that other than what it was designed to be filled by. So femininity is the empty space that wants to be filled, the wanting to take in, to receive is very, very feminine. Receptivity is very, very feminine. The other thing that femininity is, and so I can't do these separately, I guess, because I have to show the inverse. So masculinity wants to empty out. It wants to give. So masculinity is the provider, and femininity is the receptivity, the reception of that provision. So masculinity wants to empty out, and femininity wants to fill up. So that's why, guys want to come home from work and just zone out. They don't want you to talk to them. They don't, they might need a little bit of a transition period because they want to empty out. They want just blank nothingness. and that's where they feel at home, where femininity is trying to, receive and get something out of them. And they want to, empty. They want to be empty. And so, and I don't mean that in a sense of like empty-headed or empty life, but they want to empty out, and we want to fill up as women. So receptivity is a very feminine quality, but a prerequisite to receptivity is openness. So think of a flower that's a really, really tight bud, and it's closed down together. And as it blooms and opens is when you see its real beauty in that blossom. So openness is a very, very feminine quality. It's a beautiful feminine quality. Is that openness. And conversely, masculinity is very guarded and very, closed, shut down usually. Hopefully you can see some problems developing, and those are by design. They're not really problems. They're just challenges. It's like a treasure hunt that we have to navigate through. But openness, receptivity and openness is very, very feminine. Chaos is a feminine quality. So I've heard it said that femininity is the hurricane and masculinity is the wall. Masculinity is the anchor that holds inside the hurricane, and the hurricane is just swirling around you. So chaos is a feminine quality. And I don't mean chaos in a dysfunctional way, but I mean chaos in like the cutting edge of creativity. Something usually before it comes to order has to rearrange, and there's an element of chaos. And order is a masculine quality. Okay, so chaos is a feminine quality. Order and steadfastness is a masculine quality. Another masculine quality is strategy, whereas its feminine counterpart is intuition. So women are, women's intuition. It's world famous. It's a real thing. It's a feminine quality, whereas men are more like logical and strategic, and women are, femininity, I should say, is more like feeling and intuiting. And that's why usually we can really feel a situation and we're like, I don't know. I don't trust that guy. And he's like, why not? I need more to go on than that. And you're like, I don't know. I don't trust that guy. And he's like, well, you got to give me something more than that. Cause I'm just, cause he doesn't get that because it's a feminine quality. So we have openness, we have receptivity, we have chaos, and we have intuition. So, and I would say there's a lot more, like nuances of that. But if you add to it nurture, which nurture is really kind of a cross-gender quality because men have it too. But nurture is a more on like the feminine spectrum, the desire to gather people in and to create community and to make sure that everybody's taken care of and that people are included and they're taken care of and that they're connected. So connection is a very feminine quality, as well as creativity. So those would kind of be the hallmark feminine qualities. So what happens is that we have to, as feminine people, we have to access masculinity, or we can't live in the world. There's no way that we can live in the world without some level of strategy and execution. There's no way that we can live in the world. I'm a single mother, so I have to protect and provide for my children. It's not the place that I'm in my design, and it's not the place that that I feel like is going to be my reality forever. But the reality is that the situation I'm in life is that I have to protect my children. I have to provide for them. And that is every mother's reality. Even if there is a strong male in the home that's protecting and providing, women still have to protect their children. Like, if your husband is at work, if the dad's at work and your kid's running out towards a car or falls in the pool, like you're gonna protect the kid. But when you do that, you're accessing masculinity. And so to run a business, that's another thing that I do, is several of them, is run business. So I have to access strategy. I have to access execution. And as women, we have to be able to access masculinity. But we also need to know how to be able to come home to femininity. And this is where we get stuck, is because we try to live in masculinity because of the world prizing those efforts over, or those skills over, masculine skills and traits over feminine traits. So what does it look like? Number one, in the presence of your man, in the presence of a romantic relationship, it won't work if you're going to be masculine. If you're going to be masculine at home with your man, you probably don't have a man. And if you do, you're butting heads with him because you're trying to be the man, and unless he's very, very in touch with femininity, which is not necessarily a great thing because we as women despise that. So if you feel a high level of contempt and disgust towards your man, don't look at him, look at you. This is really, really, really important. If you feel a high level of contempt or disgust for your man, don't look at him, look at you. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with the way that he is or isn't showing up, but that is irrelevant because we are sovereign individuals and we take radical responsibility and we don't blame. So if you see that dynamic and you're thinking right now, yep, the guys that I date or the man that I'm married to is so weak and I have such a high level of disgust and contempt for that, what you need to be aware of in that is how you are showing up in your masculine at home, in the bedroom, or versus in the boardroom is a great little way to think of it. Because if you show up at home in your masculine, you have probably attracted a man who has armored up with femininity. I'll get to this in the next episode. But that's what happens, is the masculine attracts the feminine. So if you are heavily in masculine energy, you're going to attract a man who is heavily in feminine energy, which that equates to the perception of passivity and weakness. And as women, we think we want that because it's non-threatening. But the truth is we hate it and we despise it, because what we really want, what our heart, underneath all of the dysfunction and all of the trauma and all of the hurt, what our little girl feminine heart really wants is a strong man who will protect and provide for us. Does that mean that we're just going to sit home and bake bread and raise children and not happen in the world or not do anything that is, influential or impressive as far as business or ministry or calling goes? Absolutely not. It means that you do it from a place of covering at home. It means he has your back, basically. It means that he is running interference in making sure that all of your needs are provided for and that you are protected. So you come from this space of being protected and provided for, and imagine you can focus then on your mission. You can focus on your calling, and maybe your mission for a period is raising children and taking care of a home. And that is, there's nothing, as far as I'm concerned, I've done it all. I've worked in corporate America. I've made tons of money. I've built multiple businesses, and I've raised children. And I can say from my heart, when it's done well from femininity, raising children and nurturing a family is the most fulfilling work that there is. But that doesn't mean that that's all you're suited for. It doesn't mean that that's all you're qualified for just because you're feminine, that you need to, be the nurturer. And we're not necessarily even talking about roles. We're talking about energetics, and we're talking about skills, and we're talking about how you show up as your most authentic self. And is femininity weak because it needs to be protected and provided for? Absolutely not. That is our power position, and our position of strength comes from having the support. I want you to think about, if you haven't watched the movie Elizabeth, there's actually two of them. If you haven't watched those movies, I want you to go watch those, and I want you to think about her on her horse. I think it's in the second one. There's this scene where she's leading her army into battle, and she's on her horse, and she's in full battle array. She's in armor, and she's leading this army into battle. And behind her is this army of men, and they are just ready to do her bidding, basically, as the sovereign of the country. Not necessarily as a woman, but as the leader. She is leading this army into battle, and it is a powerful, powerful picture of the strength of femininity when it is fully expressed with the protection and the provision and the backup of the masculine. So it doesn't mean that we're weak and that we're pathetic and that we can't take care of ourselves. It means that when we have the protection and provision of a man, a masculine man, we are able to fully express our femininity in that environment. And it is a beautiful, powerful thing, and something that, quite honestly, I'm constantly developing and moving into, because I come from that background of having a father that didn't father me in this way. And so this is something that I am diligent about healing in my own life. And so it takes the self-awareness to be able to choose it and to understand why you're choosing it, and to be intentional about reconnecting and intentionally living in that zone of femininity, and so that your life begins to arrange around it. And strong men, and it doesn't have to be romantic partners, but strong men can be men in the presence of feminine women. I am raising 2 sons, and I notice when I relate to them in the masculine, we butt heads, but when I relate to them as a woman in my feminine strength, obviously I'm an authority over them. But when I relate to them as a feminine authority, they respond to that. They don't respond to masculinity. What does that look like in parenting? Well, masculinity is, just strategy and direction and da-da-da-da-da. And femininity is asking for them to, in terms of what they can protect me from and what they can provide me with. So when they do something that I don't want them to do, we have a conversation, and I let them know how that made me feel, and I let them know how they can show up in the future to protect me and provide for me. And they puff up and they connect with their true masculine hearts, and they show up, and it is a beautiful, beautiful thing to watch, because this is our healing. This is a big, important part of our healing, is knowing who we are and our design as women or as men, as feminine people or masculine people. We have to know what that is. We have to know what it looks like so that we can begin to express it. And notice when we aren't it. So this is a big reason why I created the archetypes. And there's a download available on my website, amykillingsworthpodcast.com, where you can grab the archetypes and have a little cheat sheet there. And I encourage you to do this, because this is why I created the archetypes, so you can have the self-awareness of, oh, I'm being the princess. Oh, I'm in the prisoner right now. And you can intentionally choose to rise up out of that and reign as the queen or as the king. And so an incredibly important part of the queen is knowing who she is as a female, as a feminine person. So I'm almost out of time, but I couldn't close this broadcast without talking about feminism and how feminism is, I believe, the most toxic ideology and so harmful to women and true femininity. And when I say that, I hope you know that I am all for females being empowered. I am all for females occupying positions of influence. I certainly believe that women are equal and as important to men and deserve equal pay and to vote and all of that. So please don't get it twisted. I don't believe females are better than men or men are better than females, but feminism is toxic because the message is that men are worthless and they screwed it up, and so now women need to get their chance. That's really the core of what feminism, what it's become, modern feminism or feminist activism has become, is it's like men are worthless, they've screwed it up, it's our turn now. And so it's like a reverse. It's like a swing back of like, okay, well, men were on top for a while and now women are going to be on top. And we can't be on top or on the bottom. Excuse the imagery. We have to be side by side. We have to be equals, but functioning in our design together, side by side. And the other thing that feminism does is that it tells women that they have to be men to be successful. It reinforces that toxic ideology that masculine qualities like direction, strategy, execution, protection, provision, like that they are superior. And then so for women to be superior, we need to access and display aggressive tendencies. And that is so far from the truth. You guys, we can be very, very effective without being aggressive. We can be very, very, very effective without being aggressive. We can be what we were supposed to be, what we are supposed to be. And that, my friends, us and our power as women functioning in critical roles in areas of society is what will heal the world. And conversely, we're going to talk about this next week, is calling men up to true masculinity and giving them the space to operate in that role. That means that we abdicate it and let them rise into it. We abdicate the masculine position and let them rise into it. And in the presence of a masculine man, we understand what it is to be feminine. And in the presence of a feminine woman, he understands what it is to be masculine. All right, my friends, more on this next week when we are going to take on masculinity in the context of the Rise to Reign framework and juxtapose it with femininity. And we will wrap up our discussion on the pillar of polarity. All right, that's it for today, my friends. Thank you so much for listening. This has been the Rise to Reign podcast, and I will see you next week.